Well, here in Germany, voters head to the polls on Sunday. About 60 million people are eligible to vote, and a majority of them say that they want stricter policies to curb irregular migration. Well, whatever a future government may do, some are arguing that the proposals already on the table may be too harsh.
A series of attacks by individuals with a migration background has reshaped Germany's election. Some of the attackers should already have been deported. Although many campaign posters are still focusing on the economy, migration has emerged as the central issue in the final stretch of the race.
Well, it's very important to me because I'm directly affected. I have a migration background myself, and I can see that this issue is deeply important to people. But many are afraid to openly say what they really think.
Migration is very important to me. I believe that those who have integrated here, work, earn money and contribute positively to our economy should stay. But everyone without a resident permit should leave immediately.
Very, very important, because I deal with this topic a lot in my professional life. I believe it must not be swept under the rug.
In response to voter sentiment, Germany's parties have made migration a cornerstone of their campaigns, and they're promising action. The centre-left Social Democrats and the environmentalist Greens have proposed more restrictive policies to curb irregular migration, including ending benefits for asylum seekers who enter Germany via another EU country, negotiating repatriation deals with non-EU countries to accelerate deportations, and extending temporary border checks. However, these measures fall short for other parties. The business-friendly FDP proposes cutting payments for all rejected asylum seekers without exception. And the Conservatives want permanent border controls and to reject asylum seekers arriving from EU neighbours. The far-right AfD supports this as well. Controversially, they label their plans a re-migration agenda. That's a term used by right-wing extremists to refer to mass deportations of migrants, including those holding German citizenship, though this is something the AfD leadership says it rejects. Despite some policy overlaps between the Conservatives and the far right, CDU leader Friedrich Merz has ruled out any coalition with the AfD.
We will not work together with the party that calls itself Alternative for Germany. We haven't before, we won't in the future, not ever.
But with Merz favoured to win Sunday's election, forming a government will require compromise. He may need to partner with the Greens or the Social Democrats, or both, to find common ground on migration, a decisive issue for many of Germany's 60 million eligible voters.
Well, I'm joined now by Lukas Rudolph. He's an assistant professor of political behavior with the University of Konstanz. Professor, it's good to have you with us. Let me ask you, how will Germany's migration policies shift after this election?
Thanks for having me. I mean, you can expect to see a relevant shift towards the right. You see this in the party manifestos of, even the center-left and Green parties that they shift relevantly. And this concerns particularly law and order policies, deportation. And then what's going to be contested, of course, is to what extent will we get and negotiate a European solution, or to what extent Germany will restrict on its own and then see how to get Europe on board with that.
We hear a lot that Germany needs skilled labor from abroad. We hear that Germany has a demographics problem. Are voters, is the issue that voters don't want migration, or is it that voters want a better regulated migration?
See, you emphasized in your segment that migration is the most important topic. I'm actually not so sure on that. If you ask citizens on what's the most important issue that Germany is facing, yes, they say migration. At the top there with around 37%. But if you ask them what's important for the election, or like for their own election decision, then migration isn't on top. It's only something like fourth, and top is peace, security, economy, justice in society. So other things matter for citizens as well, relevantly. That first, and then regarding what type of migration policy voters want, I think there's a relevant consensus among all the major parties, with the exception, of course, of the populist right, that you need migration into the German labor market, and then where you then have differences is to what extent do you allow such a route also for asylum seekers, and that is also where citizens are decided among partisan supporters.
And moving forward, how do you see Germany's shift when it comes to migration impacting European Union policies towards migration?
I think it will be important whether Germany will stay on board with a European solution, that's where. If Germany falls, so to say, in the sense of establishing strict border controls, then I think you will have a domino effect that could endanger a joint European system and going forward with migration.
It's been a decade since Angela Merkel, the former chancellor, decided to allow over 1 million asylum seekers to enter Germany. That decision, very briefly, we're running out of time, but was that the decision that triggered the events that have made migration the issue that it is today?
No, I don't think so. That is an issue that is fed by the populist right, based on sentiments of an economic decline, of multiple crises that hit Germany, of an economic transformation that makes many people feel insecure. And then on top, you have terrorist attacks and stuff like that. Of course, everyone agrees that, like all the political parties or the major parties agree that something has to be done. But
Professor,
it's on the background of economic decline and other crises as well. I think you have to take these into account.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, Professor, but we appreciate your time and your insights tonight ahead of the election. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
For more, we can bring in Weisskircher. He's with the Institute of Political Science at the Dresden University of Technology. Thanks for your time. Thanks for joining us today. Can you talk to us about the reasons that migration is playing such a major role in this election campaign?
Sure, definitely. Hi. Immigration has mattered strongly in the campaign. This was also visible during the TV debates between the leading candidates, between Chancellor Scholz and the challenger, Friedrich Merz. One of the reasons, apart from the long-term relevance of immigration since the mid-2010s, was that in the past few weeks, attacks in Aschaffenburg, in Munich, in December, in Magdeburg, have triggered security-related discussions about immigration. It's important to highlight that the topic is mainly revolving about immigration from outside of Europe and not within European immigration, which is much less contested.
And talk to us about the way that the individual parties are dealing with or are framing the issue of migration, because even the more progressive parties have adopted a tougher stance towards the issue, haven't they?
That's accurate. So similar to other Western European countries, it's the far right that has owned the issue of immigration. The Alternative for Germany is pushing for restrictive stances on immigration, again, especially against immigration from outside the EU. It often relies on discriminatory language. So the far right sets the agenda and the other parties don't really know how to respond. The Conservatives have basically followed in making anti-immigration demands or demands for a stricter regulation of immigration a key theme of their campaign. And the SPD and the Greens are a bit torn, struggling to find their own position, struggling between more liberal claims on immigration and also a new shift to the right, especially within the Greens. Restrictive stances are highly contested, also internally.
The election is happening on Sunday. We will have a new government, which will be a coalition government. So once we have a new government and they make policy, how then are Germany's migration policies likely to shift? Yeah,
your program also emphasized already that coalition government involves compromise, unlike, for example, in the United States. So very much will depend on the government coalition that will be eventually formed. So what's clear right now is that unlike in other Western European countries, the far right will remain out of government. The CDU will, in all likelihood, lead a government that includes either only the Social Democrats or also the Social Democrats and the Greens. And that also makes a big difference whether the Greens will be in or not. What I expect is a continuation of the long-term EU plan to regulate the external border even more. But in case the CDU is able to push forward with most of its claims, which, as your program already highlighted, also includes intensified border control to EU neighbors or the return of immigrants to other EU countries, this could trigger also political conflict within the European Union.
Just a brief last question. It's been a decade since Angela Merkel allowed over 1 million asylum seekers to enter Germany. The country's learnt a lot about how to integrate people from different cultures. Talk to us briefly, if you would, about the successes of this experience.
Sure, I think it's very important to highlight successes, something that's not done enough in the campaign. So for some immigrant populations, labour market integration has been successful. By now, about 30% of the German population has a so-called immigration background, and the German public is well aware that immigration is a reality and a fact of life. I think now it's the responsibility of the national governments in Germany and elsewhere to cause for solid integration policies, and that must include public investment into housing, into education, into the public infrastructure, because if governments don't do that, this risks social cohesion with or without immigration.
Weisskircher from the Institute of Political Science in Dresden. Thank you so much for your analysis.
Thank you.
And to talk about this more, we can speak now to DW's political correspondent, Bernd Riegert. So, Bernd, we have an election on Sunday. As it's looking, it could be that the leader of the conservative Christian Democrats, Friedrich Merz, might be Germany's next chancellor. He says all irregular migrants should be stopped from entering Germany at the borders. If he becomes Germany's next leader, is that one of the first things that he would do?
Well, that is what he promised, but it's very unlikely that he can do this. Even he said he will do it on his first day in the office, because in the next government he will rely on coalition partners. He needs either the Social Democrats or the Greens or both in a new coalition. And both parties say that the demands of Friedrich Merz are too far-reaching and also not in accordance with the law. Because you cannot simply reject everybody at the border. And also in practical terms, it would not be possible, because to close the border for all asylum seekers, you would need thousands of new police officers at the border guards, and they are simply not there. So it's a promise in the election campaign, but it will not come to fruition very soon.
OK, so we've got logistical challenges of how actually to make something like that happen. And then, as you say, the political challenges in that Germany usually has coalition governments. So how is Germany then likely to reorganise its migration policy, given that it is such a hot topic at the moment and that people say it's very important to them?
Rejections at the land borders of Germany are already happening. People who don't have the right paperwork and are not claiming asylum are rejected already. And now we are talking about people that are claiming for asylum. And it's for sure that they will also be able to enter the country after a change in government, because this is the law. And also to alter that, a new government would have to go through Bundestag and have new laws to just change it. All parties agreed, though, that the social benefits and the allowances for asylum seekers should be shortened, so to make it more unattractive or to make it more, to make them think twice before they come to Germany. This is a kind of a deterrence strategy to bring down the numbers, and all parties agree that they want to bring down the numbers of new arrivals.
And what about changes that Germany may want to make? I mean, presumably the government can't just make these changes without the agreement of Germany's European neighbours.
Well, Germany is, as the biggest country in the middle of Europe, bound to European law, which is actually also the German law. There is a system to allocate these asylum seekers, and there are reforms underway already, which only take effect in 2026. And the system says that more people should stay in the country of their first entry. That would be then Greece, Italy, Spain, Croatia, and countries in the south. But these countries are reluctant actually to keep the migrants there. So the struggle between the member states in the north and in the south will go on and cannot be solved easily, and certainly not in the first 100 days of a new government.
Bernd Riegert, DW's political correspondent. Bernd, thank you so much for that.